Welcome into the Sports Memo College Football Every Game on the Board podcast, where we have Teddy covers in. We're going to be going from 1-4-3 Virginia, NC State, down about 16, 17 games here as part of the Every Game on the Board podcast. So without further ado, we'll bring in Teddy covers. How you feeling today, buddy?
I'm feeling pretty good, Drew, man. We're, rolling right along here as we reach the end of September. Ready conference play. It's going all over the card this week, so the football season is progressing quite nicely so far.
Quite nicely for you, I'll tell you, man. 21-10 out the gate here in NFL and college football, up double digits on the year, 8-0 in NFL sides, and your big tickets hitting over 80%, Teddy. So red hot, don't change much, but anything quick you want to say before we get into the games on what you're doing correctly this year?
Well, I'll tell you one thing I want to do better than last week is I want to do college football better than last week. It was a disappointing week in college. And it was disappointing because honestly, the short list was fine. I made the wrong cuts. And that's really frustrating as a handicapper after all these years when you do that. But I like the short list this week, and we'll see if I can do a better job. And I expect to. To do what I did last week, which is literally throw out every winner that I had. That happens once every couple of years maybe, and it's pretty frustrating when it does. But I'm looking forward to getting right back on track in college, just the way we've been in NFL. And, of course, the college, even after last week's disappointment, has been over 60% for the campaign. No complaints there. And overall in football, close to 70 on the season. It has been a very good September.
Absolutely, and check out all of Teddy's work. He does have an NFL big ticket up right now. Looks to have a college football big ticket up, which, like I said earlier, have been hitting over 80% on the year since the beginning of August. So check out sportsmemo.com. Teddy's a great choice for your football handicapping needs. Teddy, let's get right off to it. Early start here, 1-4-3, 1-4-4 in the ACC. Two teams that have been pretty good. We got 53.5 the total. Virginia heading on the road to NC State with the Wolfpack laying 6. You can find a couple 5.5s. What do you got for Virginia, NC State, Teddy?
Well, Virginia 4-0 against the spread. They have a legit betting bandwagon right now. We saw it in the game against Indiana. They took money. In the game against Ohio, that was moved to a neutral site in Nashville. They took money in that game. Last week against Louisville, they were a popular choice. And then again this week, we've seen a line go from 8 at the opener down to 5.5 in a lot of spots right now. So certainly nobody's sleeping on the Cavs anymore, a team that is already 4-0 ATS. And of course, in all three of their straight-up wins this year, they've outgained their opponent by 180 yards or more, including that dominating effort against Louisville last week, where once again, the young QB Bryce Perkins was impressive with his arm and with his leg. Early in the season, more impressive with his legs than with his arm. But the last couple of weeks, he's thrown the ball well, finding receivers downfield. So there's a betting bandwagon for Virginia now. They've covered every point spread. And here's NC State, who's been relatively quiet. We haven't they had the one game that got canceled. Their marquee game got canceled. So all we've seen them is James Madison and Georgia State and Marshall. They've taken care of business. Certainly last week against Marshall, I watched that game. They were dominant in that contest. They got the returning veteran quarterback in Ryan Finley. They haven't turned the ball over much this year, one turnover or less in all three of their contests. So while Virginia has the betting bandwagon, I don't know if they got the athletes to hang with NC State on the highway. If I'm playing this one, Drew, I'll be laying with the Wolfpack.
Fair enough, Teddy. We got 1-4-5, 1-4-6, Indiana, Rutgers, Big Ten affair here. 16, Indiana laying on the road. Looks like 51 the total.
Yeah, who's going to bet Rutgers right now? Literally, who?
I wouldn't.
I don't know anyone but wise guys, Joe. There's going to be no public money on Rutgers. Let's put it that way. But we're talking about a team that's lost their, hey, I cashed a ticket with Rutgers this year, man. Week 1 against Texas State, where Satowski looked good. That was then. This is now. Since that time, they lost 53-3 to Ohio State, 55-14 to Kansas. -6 in turnovers in that game. And then last week at home against Buffalo, a game in which they won the turnover battle, they lost 42-13. Satowski's now playing QB shuffle with Resignio. Neither one of them looks to be any good, although Resignio isn't throwing the interceptions Satowski was. But, the running game isn't there. The downfield weapons at receiver. Jerome Washington's an interesting talent. But, Rutgers is what they've been, which is, Big Ten bottom feeder. Last year, these two teams met late in the season. It wasn't, early on. But Indiana, 41, Rutgers, nothing. It wasn't that close. But in terms of betting against the Scarlet Knights, look, 16.5 on the road with Indiana. I went back and tried to find the last time Indiana's laying 16.5 on the road, and I went back a long way and didn't find it. And rolling games, they're at Bowling Green, they're laying 9. FIU, they're laying 10. At Ball State, they're laying 4. Go back and back. At UMass, they're laying 13.5. Here they are laying 16.5 against Rutgers, which speaks to the market's the bottom's just dropped out of the Rutgers market right now. Difficult team to bet on, obviously, because they stink, and a team that's difficult to bet against because everyone's already done that, and the Rutgers power rating has absolutely crashed.
Teddy, let's head out west for the next 5 games here. We got 147, 148, Nevada Air Force. Looks like 63.5 the total, with Air Force laying 4.5. You can catch a couple 5s out there in the marketplace. Got anything on this one?
I watched Nevada play the last couple of weeks, and they can chuck the football around. This offense can move the football. We saw that at Toledo. I know the defense ended up giving up 63 in that game at Toledo, but that was supposed to be a flat spot. That was supposed to be a letdown. We're not going to show. And they showed, and they played, and the defense got gashed, as it's wont to do in every game. But the offense moved the ball up and down the field throughout. And I know the Air Force. I cashed a lucky ticket earlier in the season with Air Force at Florida Atlantic, and that's FAU. That's not UCF. That's not USF. That's FAU. That's the weakest of those three. And Air Force had no chance against their passing game. None whatsoever. FAU just, I think the guy had 4 or 5 incompletes for the day, and consistent big plays out of the passing offense. So I don't know how Air Force is going to stop Nevada, which explains partially at least why some of the money's come on the Wolfpack. But of course, I don't know that Nevada's going to stop Air Force much either. And you're like, oh, Nevada, I want to bet all their games over. Not against Air Force. I don't want to bet anyone over against Air Force. Air Force is going to try to take all the air out of the ball and run these 9-minute drives and keep the Wolfpack offense from getting on the field. So side and total, it's not an easy game for me to get involved with, Drew. I can understand the Nevada money, but none of this point spread range. And not given the fact that from a spot standpoint, Air Force coming in off a bye and Nevada coming in off a pair of barn burner type of ball games.
Teddy, we got one here I think we're going to disagree on. We spoke about it briefly before we got going. Utah at Washington State. Looks like the Utes now laying 1.5 or 2, depending where you're shopping. 50.5 the total. This number's been bouncing around. Started with Washington State being favored. Now it looks like Utah small favorites. So some opinion in the marketplace. What's your opinion on this one?
Sure, and of course I just gave bad info. Air Force didn't have a bye last week. They got clobbered by Utah State. Where, again, they struggled to defend the pass, for what it's worth. Utah-Washington State, look, I've watched Utah twice now, and I'm not impressed with the offense, not even a little bit. I haven't seen where are the playmakers for the Utes? Who can catch a pass and make somebody miss and get to the end zone? Who can juke a runner and make somebody miss and get to the end zone? I haven't seen that. From the Utes. I haven't even seen anything close. Look, Tyler Huntley can throw the football around. He's okay. And Zach Moss, he's certainly a solid back. But the game breakers, the big play guys, the quick strike scores, Utah doesn't have that ability. And Wazoo does. Wazoo beat them up last year in Utah, in Salt Lake City. And as we saw last week, even in defeat at USC, was who's going to put the biscuit in the basket. This team has an offense, and it's a former walk-on at quarterback. So what? So is Baker Mayfield. And the former walk-on stuff doesn't. It's okay if the guy can play. Washington State's got a QB can play. Utah has a QB can play, but no skill position talent. I know the Utes have the better defense. I understand that. I just don't think they're the better overall team. The market's like Utah. Utah's got the better defense. No surprise that the market's liking the team with the better D that was catching points. And, of course, spot-wise, Utah is coming in off the bye, although it is worth noting when you start to do some historical database research on college football bye weeks, they matter more and more as the season progresses. September byes are not as important for the following week's game as October or November byes. And I just looked at a study by month, and basically the September bye, you're betting on teams off a bye in September, pretty much close to a coin flip. And it's not that case for teams off a bye later in the season.
Teddy, that makes sense. I was turned on to that last season, that later season bye weeks matter more. I will say this though, Kyle Whittingham off a bye, I believe is 10-5 in his stints at Utah, and he's also 11-1 in bowl games. So the extra preparation time does help him. And Tyler Huntley, he touches the ball every play, and I believe he's the best athlete on the field in this game. So I don't know. I think that there's definitely cases to be made for both sides. You made a bunch of them towards Washington State, and sitting here at this low number, I like Utah on the side. I don't know anything you want to say in conclusion.
No, we're allowed to have. If we all have the same opinion, there will be no betting. Okay, we're supposed to have disagreements, and smart people are supposed to have disagreements, and knowledgeable people are supposed to have disagreements. Because again, if you don't have two sides to an argument, there's no betting market. So it's okay. You're allowed to be wrong on this one.
Yeah, that's what makes a market. But Teddy, I'll tell you, it's 2018, man. You got to be offended when I come in on the other side. All right,
Jerk.
We'll move on. 151, 152. Oregon State, Arizona State. Looks like we got the Sun Devils laying 21.5 at home. A couple 22s out there. 64.5 the total, Teddy.
Yeah, you excited about laying this with the Sun Devils?
It's the only way I would do it at home.
Yeah, well, again, they scored 49 in the opener against UTSA. We'll talk about Texas San Antonio later on. But since then, 16 points against Sparty, 21 against San Diego State, 20 against Washington. I know this is a big step down in defensive class after playing Michigan State, San Diego State, and Washington in the last three ball games. But I'm not, Manny Wilkins in this price range, I'm not there with Arizona State laying 3 touchdowns. And look, for all Oregon State's troubles, all right, defensively that team is pretty abysmal. Offensively, they can put the biscuit in the basket. They've moved the football around. Last year, 40-24 at Oregon State. Comfortable Arizona State win, but they win by that margin this year. Comfortable win at home, all fat and happy. They won't be enough to cover this point spread.
Teddy, this is a tricky handicap in my opinion. We got 153, 154 BYU at Washington. Looks like the Huskies laying 17 at home, 46.5 the total. What's your take on this one?
It's an interesting handicap, and it comes down to me, in my mind, a couple of different factors here. So, if you watch the BYU-Wisconsin game, BYU got the win, of course, but a lot of it was Wisconsin. Let's just say they didn't bring their A game. When you read the post-game quotes, and the Badgers are like, we didn't show up for this game. It wasn't there for the Badgers, but BYU's getting all the credit for that victory. You watch the BYU offense work, and Mangum's, he's okay, but again, you talk about playmakers. Who can actually make a play against this Huskies defense? And I don't know that anybody at BYU is getting yards after the catch in this ball game. I really wonder how that offense gets up and down the field against the Huskies defense. Because remember, BYU has the edge. They're so big and physical in the trenches. They got all these 26-year-old kids playing college ball, back off their missions. And their physicality overwhelms a lot of teams. I don't think it's going to overwhelm the Washington Huskies. That being said, BYU defensively is solid. And as we've seen over and over and over and over again from Jake Browning and company, Huskies don't put up points super easy. Yeah, they got NFL running back. Yeah, they got NFL wideouts. Yeah, they got NFL offensive line. They don't have an NFL quarterback. And a team that gets Browning is going to watch him sit on the bench and sit on the practice squad and be out of the league in 3 years. So Washington, for me, is a very difficult team to get involved with right now. I do respect their talent level. I love their defense, but they're being asked to lay these big, big prices And I don't trust them to lay big prices. They haven't been particularly good at laying these big prices, even playing at home in Seattle.
Today, I just want to make sure you were talking about Jake Browning not being a next-level quarterback, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
What did I say?
No, you were right. I just wanted to make sure before I followed up by saying I agree with you. And I've talked to other people that think like, oh, he's one of the best quarterbacks in the conference. I just don't see it. He doesn't make enough plays. I could see it like you, like he makes a practice squad or whatever, and then just gets cut in a couple years, and he's done in football. So I agree with you on that. We got 155, 156 Toledo, Fresno State. Looks like Fresno State laying 8.5, couple 7.5, so some opinion in the marketplace. 61 the total. How you feel about this MAC squad going out and playing Fresno State, Teddy?
I mean, Fresno's played, 17 games under Tedford, and they've been the point spread loser in 3 of those games. And at least one of them, a game at Minnesota this year, that was, yes, they lost. They were the better team in that game, which happens when you're a team like Fresno going on the road to play a Big Ten foe. I do not take Fresno lightly. I will not step in front of this team. They're a juggernaut ATS-wise, and the market's obviously showing respect for Fresno now, just like they showed respect when Fresno beat UCLA. I remember that game. I watched UCLA get smacked by Fresno, and Fresno was the better of the 2 teams in that ball game. So you worry about the spot here a little bit for Toledo. They're coming off a couple of big games at home. They got the Wolfpack last week. They blew them out, and then Miami the week before. You have MAC play starting next week. It's not what I would consider to be a Toledo spot, and yet we have seen some Rockets money because Fresno's being, again, Fresno laying points at UCLA, Fresno laying doubles at home to Toledo. The market's, while Tedford's gone 14-3, or 13-3-1, whatever you want to call it. It's the market's having your days of extreme value on the Fresno State Bulldogs have come and gone. The markets aren't sleeping on this team anymore, and we've actually seen with the sharp money coming on Toledo in early week betting, we've seen one of the first times that I can recall during this whole run that the markets are saying Fresno's priced too high. Fresno's priced too high. That's been I don't know that I've seen that in the last year and a half with money coming in against the Bulldogs.
Teddy, we got some action with Western Michigan traveling to play Miami of Ohio. Looks like laying 1 or 1.5 on the road. 55 the total.
Yeah, and look, I mean, Western with a nice win last week in a game where they, there was I don't know the class difference against Georgia State, but certainly, Wasnick had his best game. 20 of 25 passing, 234 yards, 3 touchdowns, no INTs. Miami's got a better defense than that, and their offense woke up last week, beating Bowling Green, snapping off that disappointing start to the season. And, the running back was named Smith, 164 yards on the ground last week. He could do it again here against the Broncos. I'm not sold on Western's defense, and I'm a little bit surprised. We saw heavy Western Michigan money last week. A little bit surprised at how heavy the Western Michigan money has been this week. My powering numbers have Miami as the favorite in this ballgame, and that's not where the markets are right now.
Teddy, we got a matchup of 2 disappointing teams so far this year. 159-160 FSU at Louisville. Looks like Florida State laying just less than a touchdown. Market pretty much at 6.5 across the board. 45.5 the total, Teddy.
Yeah, I talked about last week I threw out my winners and kept my losers, and one of the winners I threw out was a play on Virginia against Louisville. And the reason that I threw that play out was because Petrino was making the QB change to Malik Cunningham. And Cunningham, the Frosh, had been remarkable coming off the bench. He led the team to 8 touchdowns in 12 drives. Whereas Juwan Pass was, not so good. So last week, Cunningham gets the start and does absolutely nothing, gets annihilated by Bronco Mendenhall's defense. And Petrino, instead of sticking with him, goes back to pass. And that was, that's a red flag. That's a big red flag. And they still didn't score, and the offense still didn't work. And now, I'll tell you what, I mean, again, it's just one game, but it's not just one game. Louisville's been bad from day one this season, and the Western Kentucky loss stands out. Or there's a win, they won the game 20-17, but that certainly stands out now. You say, wow, and of course, everyone got throttled by Alabama. You say, oh, it's no big deal, they got throttled by Alabama. Yeah, but now you look at it and you say, Louisville stinks this year, man. They don't have Lamar Jackson anymore, and without Lamar Jackson, what's Petrino? Petrino's an old coach with a dicey roster. Florida State finishes another game -4 in turnovers. Last week against Northern Illinois, they still get the win and cover. Do you give them credit for doing that? Certainly their defense. I mean, Northern Illinois had no chance in that game, and Florida State's defense certainly should match up fairly well against Louisville, especially after Louisville beat them last year, 31-28, down in Tallahassee. But Florida State's offense is what it is. The offensive line's not getting better. They were -4 in turnovers at home against Northern Illinois, and for as good as the defense is capable of being, now you're talking about a game that's getting steamed up. You're laying almost a touchdown on the highway with Florida State, and it's an offense that you have a hard time trusting to score. So, I lean Seminoles, but in this point spread range, I'm not going to get to the window. The markets have absolutely crashed on Petrino's Louisville Cardinals.
Teddy, we got a huge game in the Big Ten. Ohio State traveling to Happy Valley to take on Penn State. Laying 3 now on the road. It was 4, now then 3.5. Now we're seeing pretty much 3s across the board. Some 3.5s at the Vegas sports books. 70.5 the total. What do you got on this big matchup this weekend, Teddy?
And everybody wants action on the big games in college football. Good luck if you're looking for action. This is a hard game in my mind to predict action on. And there are some fine money-making opportunities in college football. They don't always come from the marquee games. This line's exactly where it's supposed to be, okay? The books are going to take as much money on this game as they'll probably take on an NFL game on Sunday. I mean, this will be the biggest betting game of the weekend or the day on Saturday, this or Stanford, Notre Dame. Everyone's going to be watching it and so on and so forth. From a betting standpoint, there's nothing, man. Penn State upset them here 2 years ago. Last year had a lead in Columbus. Ohio State rallies back, wins 39-38. But certainly nothing to indicate that there's a class difference between these two squads. Penn State with a couple of somewhat fraudulent covers, the win against Pitt, and certainly the win against Illinois last Friday night, games that were far more competitive than the final score would indicate, but that's what teams with great athletes can do. Ohio State with Haskins and a 16-1 touchdown interception ratio, and they've won and covered every game, and they've got a betting bandwagon a mile long, and Penn State's got a betting bandwagon a mile long. 39-38 last year, shootout. I wouldn't be surprised if we see a shootout in this game once again. McSorley is making me a believer, and Haskins has been as good as anyone in college football, but at the same time, these are not weak defenses, neither one of them. And you end up with, 1 8-minute field goal drive, and you're already, behind the 8 ball when it comes to cashing an over ticket here. So, interesting game to watch. I'm sure I'll have it on. But from a wagering standpoint, I got nothing.
Teddy, who's got the better quarterback?
McSorley's the better quarterback.
Okay. Yeah, I agree with you.
Right now, at the collegiate level, McSorley's, and not to say that nothing against Haskins. McSorley's done it for longer. And we haven't seen Haskins in a true hostile environment. Remember that TCU game? Yeah, it was. What was it? It was in Texas. But there was a large contingent of Buckeye fans there. That won't be the case in whiteout conditions in Happy Valley on Saturday night.
And from a side perspective, it sounds like you're not really interested in laying the 11-10. But what about 70.5 the total? You think there's any value on this over?
So, to repeat what I just said, when we're talking about these two offenses, elite athletes on both sides, but both defenses are loaded with playmakers, and all it takes is one long drive. You get an 8-minute drive that doesn't produce a touchdown, and you're behind the 8 ball when it comes to the total. So the lean is over, but there's no way to get to the betting window with it, especially after the markets have already steamed it up.
All right, to the Sun Belt, 163, 164, Arkansas State, Georgia Southern. Two, I guess in the top echelon teams, Arkansas State, the class of the Sun Belt, at least for the past couple years. Laying 3 on the road in Statesboro, 54 the total, Teddy.
Yeah, I don't do much with the Sun Belt once regular season play begins. So, I know that Sun Belt is a conference you look at closely. What do you like on this one?
I like Arkansas State. I really do. I think that just athlete for athlete, they're better than everybody else in the conference. I would look to bet them, and almost every time I would be involved with them when they're playing another Sun Belt team.
Sure, and the price is fairly reasonable at -3. Yeah, when it comes to, I personally have had no success betting in conference Sun Belt games, and that's a track record over a decade. So what I do when Sun Belt, I'll look at them, see if I see anything. But in terms of like really digging deep to find the Sun Belt info, I don't do it. There are plenty of other conferences and plenty of other, even the MAC I find good info on now, but Sun Belt, I've just never been able to find the info that I'm looking for. And my concept for teams in a conference like the Sun Belt, I'm not looking to bet the whole conference. If I can find one bet on team and or one bet against team, I'm happy. And that's, in my mind, the best way to make money with some of the lesser conferences. Find the one team that's undervalued and bet them every week because the markets take a while to catch up. Or find the one team that stinks and people think is okay, and you can bet against them every week. And I don't mean every week forever, but you can get 3, 4, 5 wins going on or against one team if you can find that squad and time it correctly.
Let's head to the SEC East here. Tennessee at Georgia, 51.5 the total. Looks like the Bulldogs laying 30.5 at home in Athens. Anything on this one?
Yeah, it's been pretty ugly for Tennessee, huh?
Yeah.
And I'm saying that, with a grain of salt. But I mean, the Vols. How do we say it? They don't have an SEC quarterback. And when you don't have an SEC quarterback and you're playing in the SEC, that's a problem. We saw it against West Virginia. We saw it against UTEP. Where the offense, they're -2 in turnovers, and they scored 24 in a game they're laying 31 in. And then, of course, the debacle last week against Florida where they turned the ball over 6 times. And look, if they can avoid turning the ball over 6 times, maybe they can hang within 30 points of Georgia. You do. I'm at least modest concerned about the spot for the Bulldogs. It's not a sandwich spot per se. They only have Vandy at home next week. But that was a wild game against Missouri last week in Columbia. And the defense got gashed a little bit for the first time. So maybe there's some vulnerability there for Georgia. Not a game I'm going to get involved with. Once you start getting into the 4 touchdowns and above, the dogs are outclassed, and the favorites you have to worry about focus after halftime. You don't want to, lay your price and then see what happened with Miami and Florida last week, for example, where dominating the game 31-0 going to the fourth quarter, and oops, we just fell asleep a little bit. FIU comes through the back door. That potential exists here for a team like Tennessee.
Great points. We got 167, 168. Liberty, New Mexico, 64.5 the total. Looks like the Lobos laying 7 at home.
Yeah, and Liberty's interesting. The week 1 game against Old Dominion, where they took a ton of money and everyone was betting Liberty, and they killed them 52-10. And the same thing happened in week 2. They were all betting Liberty against Army, and they were never in that game. I thought they were in that game at halftime. They were in that game for a half, but the offense didn't work. And then, of course, at bye week and last week against North Texas. North Texas is kind of a little juggernaut right now. If you don't know, you should. But Liberty was non-competitive in that game as well. So when you're getting blown out by Army and getting blown out by North Texas, and then you're blowing out Old Dominion, it just beat Virginia Tech. Liberty's from a power rating standpoint, I'm not super comfortable with my Liberty number. They've had bad first quarters, they've had bad fourth quarters. That's a problem. And the Lobos, they got the money against Wisconsin, then they beat up New Mexico State, then they had a bye. This is around the time of year that Bob Davie tends to start making us money. But it's not a game that I'm about to get to the betting window with, but I can certainly understand why New Mexico's laying a full TD here, even though we have seen some money on the Liberty Flames.
Teddy, we got Conference USA versus the SEC as Southern Mississippi travels to play Auburn. Looks like 52.5 the total. And the War Eagles laying about 27 at home in Jordan-Hare. You like anything in this one?
Well, Auburn's been such a bad home favorite. Under Malzahn, something like 3-13-1 the last 17 tries. And they play this game every year. They've got some team, they're coming off a big game. and they got a big game. And not that Arkansas was that big game, but they're coming off a couple of SEC games, and they got a road trip to Mississippi State on deck. It's your flat spot game for Auburn, and we've seen these repeatedly in the Malzahn era. And repeatedly in the Malzahn era, they've struggled to cover some of these numbers. Now they have some of them, but not a ton of them. They had last year Mercer in this spot. They went 24-10. They had Louisiana Monroe in this spot the year before that and did cover the number in that contest. But a game against San Jose State, they only win by 14. A game against La Tech, they don't cover the minus 33. Western Carolina. I mean, on and on down the line, you see these games be. It's not a trap. Auburn's not going to lose this game. One wouldn't think, but in terms of covering the number, that's something of an issue. Now, we've seen very little out of Southern Miss so far this season. Another team that had one game canceled: Jackson State, Louisiana Monroe, Rice, and then here go to Auburn and then go to North Texas next week. Not an easy slate by any stretch of the imagination, but the quarterback Abraham threw for 428 yards and 4 touchdowns last week, and if he can complete a couple passes downfield against Tigers secondary, the back door here might be open.
171-172 Iowa State TCU. Looks like the Horned Frogs laying 10.5 at home, 46.5 the total, Teddy.
Yeah, I'm tempted by TCU. I don't know if I'm going to get the window with it, but I'm definitely tempted by TCU. And they're in revenge mode. Remember, they lost 14-7 at Iowa State in Ames last year. And we're talking about a couple of teams that have some QB issues right now. Of course, Iowa State is playing without the starter Kemp, although the backup's been every bit as good. There's no drop-off whatsoever. Let me get the numbers real quick. But, I mean, the numbers have been rock solid in that regard in his first 2 collegiate starts. Sorry, it's taking a minute for this page to load, and I apologize. Noland, so for 636 yards and 3 TDs, completing 69% of his passes against Oklahoma and Akron. Oklahoma, impressive. The Akron defense, remember what they did to Northwestern. That was a tough little game for Iowa State last week, and they found a way to get through it. But now you got to hit the highway. Their only road game this year, they scored 3 at Iowa. They got to face a TCU team off back-to-back losses, which one would expect them to be intense this week, and Gary Patterson to be perhaps at his best. And of course, they're in revenge for what happened last year. All of that being said, boy, you want a good track record? Look at Matt Campbell as a road dog. This has been his role, and Iowa State covered over and over and over and over and over again in these type of spots, which is part of the reason why I haven't gotten to TCU yet. Maybe we get there. They're on the short list, but certainly when you talk about it's not a long-term track record. It's only his 3rd year at Iowa State, but Matt Campbell's teams have done very, very well catching points on the highway. Last trip to TCU, however, 41-20. They were plus 24.5 in that ball game. So we're seeing a 2 TD difference between TCU Iowa State 2 years ago and TCU Iowa State now from a point spread perspective. I'm not sure that's warranted.
Teddy, we got an interesting one here in terms of just talking about the handicap. 68.5 the total as Lafayette travels to Alabama. Alabama's just becoming a really tough team to put a number on, and you can see it. It's growing. I mean, they're almost laying, damn near 50 points now, 48.5. It is at home, but it's against Lafayette, who's, they're not a terrible, terrible Sun Belt team. I'd say mid-level here. They do have some athletes. So, I mean, are you ready to lay 50 now with Nick Saban and company?
No, it's an easy game. You just throw it out and move on to the next one. I mean, Alabama is an impossible team. Okay, and when you have teams like this, there's Washington is a really hard team to bet right now. I'm not involved in a bunch of Ohio State games right now. The highest profile teams, they're not necessarily the best teams to bet on or against. Alabama is that good. They can kill anybody by any score they want to. My powering number on this game was 53. Okay. But I mean, literally, that factored in a full home field, which you probably shouldn't do in a game like this. But my power number was 53, but we saw it last week. Alabama takes an A&M team, and they were in control that whole game. They win by 3 touchdowns, all sound good, and they don't cover the number, which tells you that it's going to be hard to make money with Alabama moving forward. And you want the dog here? Knock yourself out. Have fun with Lafayette. And as soon as the opening kickoff goes, just go tick, 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 please, click, please, tick, please, tick. Because, that's all you have from a UL Raging Cajun perspective. Raging Cajuns have not covered any of their last 6 tries following 6 tries to the double-digit underdog.
All right, Teddy, we got 175-176 Baylor at Oklahoma. Looks like 69 now the total. The Oklahoma Sooners, interesting one as well. I mean, it's been bet up a little bit. We got 23.5 pretty much across the board in Norman. Would you look to bet Baylor versus Oklahoma?
I mean, no, I wouldn't. I really wouldn't. I've not been impressed with Baylor. Not even close. And, even the win against Kansas last week. I mean, they're supposed to year, not this year. And you start to look back at some of the results. I mean, I know they beat Kansas last week. It wasn't impressive. It wasn't impressive the week before against Duke. They were, the receivers couldn't get open in that ball game. The win over Texas San Antonio wasn't good. I mean, and of course, last year at debacle, Matt Rule is still in this situation where, what is Baylor's identity? I don't know. Oklahoma couldn't get, the offense couldn't get on the field last week because Army just kept running clock, and let's grind out a couple more yards. One would think that after last, I'm not going to call it a debacle. They faced a difficult matchup for them, and they paid the price for it with a lack of defensive preparation. But this isn't a lack of defensive preparation game. And 49-41 last year, 45-24 the year before that, 44-34 the year before that. We haven't seen these big blowouts from Oklahoma over Baylor, but I wouldn't be shocked to see the Cowboys take care of business. The Sooners take care of business on Saturday.
He said he covers 21-10 on the year in NFL college football, up double digits for himself and his clients, and he's got a 20-star NFL up on sportsmemo.com, 8-0 on NFL sides so far this year. Teddy, we got 3 games left, 177, 178 UTEP, Texas San Antonio, 44 the total. Looks like UTSA laying 10 at home. So
UTEP is probably the worst team in college football. Certainly one of the 2 or 3 worst teams in college football from a power rating perspective. And I'm not getting the window betting the very, very worst teams. You're asking for trouble. I thought Texas San Antonio was a little better than they are. I watched the game last week against Texas State, and I thought they were going to be there's a little bit of a class difference, and there wasn't. And Texas State is right there with UTEP as one of the worst teams in college football. And Texas San Antonio, they were lucky to win that game. And they had a chance for I needed the point spread cover, and they had a chance to give me a point spread cover thanks to a defensive score. And then with like 3 minutes left, they got a punt block deep in their own zone that led to the final touchdowns. They didn't get the money, but it's not an offense that you trust to move the football up and down the field, and it's not a defense that you trust to get stopped. So I've had my fun laying points with Texas San Antonio. Yes, I'm being facetious. I will not do that again anytime soon.
In the Big Ten, we got Purdue at Nebraska. Looks like the Boilermakers laying 3.5 on the road. Teddy, this is another Nebraska team. It's tough to bet them, but 56.5 the total. Would you look to bet them here?
See, it's really an interesting game because at Purdue after that 0-3 start, and they beat up Boston College, and you say, man, if I bet Purdue every week, maybe make some money with this team. I mean, after that slow start, and we like Braum. We certainly think that Blau can play, and that this is a team that has been. The defensive effort last week was impressive, and really, the turnovers in the Northwestern game. Okay, so be it. The defensive effort there was solid. All right, they got gashed a little bit by Missouri. Guess what? Missouri's really good. So I get the feel that if you're starting to bet, if you're on Purdue, you bet them game in, game out, you're going to make some money. Nebraska is not as bad as Michigan's a juggernaut. Okay, they had a really bad game against Troy. The game against Colorado, they were in position to win. And now they're home dogs and more than a field goal. It just feels like that number's too high, 25-24. Nebraska beat them last year. They were no good last year, 27-14 the year before that. And you can go on and on down the line. Pretty good track record for the Huskers. And I don't think they're going to go not win a game this year. After this, they got at Wisconsin and at Northwestern. I think it's the Huskers' game to win. I could only play them in that regard, even though I do think that Purdue has the potential to be a moneymaker down the road.
Teddy, we got last game here, Texas, Kansas State. Before we do that, just a reminder, Teddy's got his 20-star NFL up on sportsmemo.com. Also check out his full season package. You can get it for under a dime. That will run you throughout the national championship or Super Bowl or both, whatever you want to do, NFL and college football. Teddy covers out of the gate 21-10, up double digits for his clients. Great choice to get on the right side in both NFL and college football at sportsmemo.com. Let's end it here, Teddy, and then we'll bring in Rob Vino to close off the card. We got Texas, Kansas State. Texas 8.5 on the road. They're laying 48.5 the total in Manhattan.
Well, Kansas State's one of those teams I don't want any part of right now. I've seen it twice. The Mississippi State game, they were badly outclassed. The West Virginia game, they were badly outclassed. The offense isn't working, and I know Bill Snyder is a dog. Oh, Bill Snyder's a dog. Great. K-State's no good this year. Their quarterback play is bottom tier. I'm looking for playmakers. I'm looking for the quick strike guys, and I haven't seen any on the Wildcats. Wearing the Wildcats purple. Here's Texas. All right, back-to-back huge wins for the Longhorns. Now they're going on the road, and it's certainly a spot that is fraught with worry for Tom Herman and company. After USC and TCU and coming up on the right side of both those ball games. On the other hand, this Texas team might just be getting started. They're finding their confidence. They are getting better every week. And I think there's something of a class difference here. They beat them by 6 at home last year, covered -5. They lost at K-State on their last visit. But, this is a Texas team. Again, we started to say, is this a money-making team? Off that bad opener against Maryland and then the bad second half against Tulsa, 2-0 ATS, 2-0 straight up since. I wouldn't be surprised if Texas, too, ends up being a moneymaker for their backers, even into the month of October.
All right, Teddy, thanks for your time. He's Teddy Covers. Follow him on Twitter at Teddy_Covers. We'll be back in just a minute with the next segment to close out the college football Every Game on the Board podcast.